Eric Larson, a European subscriber of ours, wrote in and asked for us to describe the differences and the advantages and the disadvantages of the European trucks versus the American trucks. The first and most noticeable difference between the European trucks and the American trucks is that virtually all highway trucks in Europe are cabovers, whereas in America, they've virtually all got a hood of some sort. So, why is that? Well, the first reason is European trucks are governed to an overall length of 61 feet. That's total vehicle length, 61 feet. So in that 61 feet, they obviously want to get as much cargo capacity as possible because that's where the money comes from. That's where the revenue is. So they want to maximize the trailer that they can pull in the 61 feet. And what that means to the truck is that it's got to be as small as possible. Hence the cabover design. The American trucks are not governed that way at all. American length laws dictate that only the trailers are measured for legal length. And in most states now, it's still 53 feet. We have some trailers that are allowed to go 60 feet in some states like California, and there are various configurations all across the states in Canada where you can pull multiple trailer setups. So there is not a length restriction for American trucks, so that extra hood length doesn't really make any difference for them to be legal. In Europe, it's a big deal to be within this 61-foot length. So the second thing you've got to think about with Europe is, so why are they restricted to this 61-foot length? And the answer lies in the fact that their road systems are entirely different than the North American road systems. Road systems in Europe generally are two-lane roads. They're a lot windier. The road systems are an older system. They've been around there a lot longer. They were put in years ago. And it's not nearly as big and wide and open as an expansive highway as the American interstate system. So the European trucks have to navigate all sorts of two-lane roads, all sorts of curves, all sorts of tight corners. Their trucks have to be maneuverable. They've got to be as maneuverable as possible to take advantage of their trailer length. So the European trucks generally are cabovers because cabovers are far more maneuverable. The axle is right underneath the truck, right underneath the engine. It makes for a much tighter turning radius for a cabover, and some of their trucks even still have a tag axle, which is on the two, if they have two axles at all on the back, and a lot of them don't. A lot of them only have the one axle on the back. But if they have a two-axle setup, a dual axle, all sorts of them are tag axles, and a tag axle lifts up, drops the air out of them, picks up the axle, so the tractor can pivot even tighter. Now, we used to have tag axles here in America, but for some reason we've kind of gotten away from those, but that is a big difference, and that is why. The European trucks need to be a whole lot more maneuverable than the trucks that operate here in North America. Now, because these road systems are so different, that brings us to the difference in speed limits allowed by the American trucks as compared to the European trucks. European trucks are governed at 55 miles an hour. Whereas here in North America, they're governed at 75 or 80 miles an hour, depending on where you are. So the speed of the truck becomes an important factor. At 55 miles an hour, a cabover isn't fighting the wind nearly as badly at 55 miles an hour, so it's not hurting their fuel mileage nearly as badly as a cabover that was operating in the States, for instance, running 75 miles an hour, which is the speed limit in Wyoming, for instance. So fuel mileage, fuel efficiency isn't as big a deal in Europe as it is here in North America because they're just going slower. And it's interesting to note that the cabovers in Europe get roughly the same fuel mileage as the conventionals here in the United States, but the difference is because of the speeds that they can travel. And on the windy windy European roads, it's not practical for trucks to be able to run much over 55 unless they're on the German Autobahn. But here in the States and in North America, there are all sorts of huge expanses of road where it makes more sense to allow the trucks to go faster, but this does affect their wind resistance, so a cabover is not practical anymore so much in the US because These trucks that need to run 75 miles an hour across Wyoming need to maximize their fuel mileage. Driving Test has developed an online training course that will help you get your ELDT certification and help you pass your CDL knowledge exam. Driving Test is certified by the FMCSA and is recognized as America's #1 online CDL training program. Check them out at drivingtest.org. Now, when we're comparing the American trucks to the European trucks, we've got to talk about a few of the serious advantages that European trucks have. They are smaller, and hence because they're smaller, they're lighter, and because of that, they can haul more cargo, but also they're far more maneuverable, and that's a huge advantage. And as our trailer systems grow and grow up over here and get longer and longer, that maneuverability is going to be something that we come to envy. And the conventionals, while they're a lot better than they used to be, are not still in the same league as a good cabover. Now, there are some serious disadvantages to the European trucks over the American trucks, and probably one of the most noticeable is that the European trucks don't have the driver living space built into them the way the American trucks are. Now, I'm given to understand that the European drivers generally only spend a couple days at a time on the road, so their truck living space doesn't have to be nearly as comfortable. But if you look at the pictures of the European trucks, they're the driver in the passenger seat, and then dead behind it is the bed. There's no walking space, there's no room at all. You basically have the bed right behind the driver's seat. Whereas in the American trucks, there's generally a little bit of walking space back to the bunk. You can stand up and get your pants on and that type of thing. But typically, American drivers are out on the road for weeks at a time. And when you look at some of these guys like that work for Reliable, some of those guys are only home a couple times a year. Hence, they need bigger living space. So American trucks tend to have the advantage that way. Now, recently I've been seeing this Scania XXXL long line truck that Scania is producing, and it's basically a double bunk cabover with a walk-in sleeper, and that thing is gorgeous inside. It's got a Chesterfield at the back, a table with a couple of swivel chairs, and a bunk bed up above. So maybe there's a trend with the European trucks and drivers to want more livable driver space. That is a good thing in my opinion, and the Scania that I saw, the pictures of it, are just beautiful. Now finally, with the European trucks, it needs to be mentioned that cabovers are never as safe for the driver in a head-on collision situation. And that's primarily one of the reasons that we got away from cabovers in North America, because the expression was, in a cabover, when you're the driver, you're the first one on the scene of the accident. So this is a disadvantage of the European trucks, but hopefully there aren't too many situations where you run into a headlong collision anymore. It still happens, but absolutely the cabovers are more dangerous in a head-on collision for the driver. A modern American truck simply could not do the work required of it if it was situated over in Europe. It's just not a practical solution. Now, while I was researching for this video, I was reminded that I grew up driving cabovers, and I quite like the cabovers. And when I was looking at some of these pictures of the new Scanias with the 770 horse V8 engines, I thought, man, I would really like to try to drive one of those trucks. And they're beautiful looking trucks. I miss the cabovers. And I'd like to know what you guys think. I would like to see cabovers come back to American highways. Nicola is working on a cabover right now. I hope it comes to be, because I really enjoyed the cabovers. Let me know if you did too. Take care, keep the rubber side down. I'd really like to drive one of those new Scanias. I'll see you on the back haul.